Nobody paid attention to the attractive woman in the dirty flight suit. Emma had been working on the flight line at Nellis Air Force Base for 8 years, always quiet, always humble. Until the day a training exercise turned deadly, and Emma had to choose between keeping her secret or saving her squadron. What she did next shocked everyone at the base. From which city around the world are you watching today? If this story moves you, please subscribe to Rising Life Stories to help us share more stories of hidden heroes. Staff Sergeant Emma Rodriguez was a paradox at Nellis Air Force Base. At 42, she was undeniably attractive, dark hair always pulled back in a regulation bun, intelligent brown eyes, and a confident stride that suggested hidden depths. But Emma had spent 8 years perfecting the art of invisibility, hiding behind dirty flight suits and a deliberately quiet demeanor on the Nevada desert base. "There goes the ghost," muttered Staff Sergeant Mike Tex Johnson, watching Emma perform her pre-flight inspection on an F-16 Fighting Falcon with methodical precision. The nickname wasn't meant to be cruel. Emma was polite, professional, and incredibly skilled, but she maintained strict boundaries that no one at Nellis had ever managed to cross. The 57th Wing flight line at Nellis was the crown jewel of Air Force training. F-16s, F-15s, and F-22s filled the massive hangars, preparing pilots for the most advanced combat scenarios. Emma worked exclusively on the F-16 C Block 50s, used by the 64th Aggressor Squadron, the elite unit that played enemy forces in red flag exercises. "That woman knows these Vipers better than their own pilots," commented Master Sergeant Tony Bull Williams, watching Emma trace hydraulic lines with surgical precision. 8 years here, perfect maintenance record, never missed a deadline. But she's like a phantom, here 1 minute, gone the next. Emma's reputation was built on excellence and mystery. She arrived at Nellis before dawn, worked through the blazing Nevada heat, and stayed late under the desert stars to ensure every F-16 was combat ready. Other technicians sought her expertise when they encountered problems that stumped even veteran mechanics. Pilots specifically requested her for pre-flight inspections, trusting her thoroughness above all others. But Emma was also known for her isolation. She didn't join the other mechanics for drinks in Las Vegas, politely declined invitations to squadron barbecues, and had never been seen at any social gathering in 8 years. During breaks, she'd sit alone in the air-conditioned break room, studying technical manuals and aircraft specifications. "You know what's strange?" asked Airman First Class Casey Kid Rodriguez one afternoon as they watched Emma work. "I've never seen her near a cockpit. She'll crawl under the plane, work on the wings, spend hours in the engine bay, but she never goes near the front seat." The younger airmen had theories about Emma's background. Some thought she was former Army, maybe a helicopter mechanic. Others believed she was naturally antisocial. A few speculated she might have security clearance issues that kept her from certain areas. None of them imagined that Emma avoided cockpits because sitting in one would trigger memories so painful she'd spent 8 years trying to bury them in the Nevada desert. What they didn't know was that Staff Sergeant Emma Rodriguez wasn't her real name, and maintaining F-16s wasn't her first career in the Air Force. March 15th dawned clear and scorching over the Nevada desert. Emma arrived at the flight line at 0430 hours, 90 minutes before her official shift, to conduct her personal inspection of the F-16s scheduled for Red Flag 23-2, the largest air combat exercise in the world. Foreign pilots from allied nations mixed with American crews, preparing for simulated combat over the Nevada test and training range. Colonel Rebecca Hawk Thompson, commander of the 64th Aggressor Squadron, was briefing 6 pilots on the day's mission. Emma worked quietly nearby, checking weapons pylons and flight control surfaces, but her trained ear caught every word of the tactical briefing. "Today's scenario involves a high-threat environment with advanced surface-to-air missiles and enemy fighters," Colonel Thompson explained. "You'll be flying against F-22s from Langley and F-15ES from Seymour Johnson. The opposition is expecting our usual tactics, so we're changing the playbook." Emma had heard thousands of these briefings over the past 8 years. She knew the red flag scenarios by heart, could predict pilot mistakes before they happened, and understood F-16 limitations better than most instructors. But she never offered input, never shared observations, never revealed that she knew more about air combat than many of the pilots she served. Second Lieutenant Jake Rookie Anderson was assigned to aircraft 89-2137, an F-16C that Emma had been tracking for unusual engine parameters. The jet's engine was running within acceptable limits, but Emma's experienced ear detected subtle irregularities that the computerized systems couldn't identify. "Lieutenant Anderson," Emma called out as he approached his aircraft, "I've been monitoring some engine data on this bird. Everything's in the green, but I'd keep an eye on your engine parameters during high G maneuvers." Lieutenant Anderson nodded politely but dismissively. At 24, he was fresh from Luke Air Force Base and confident in his abilities. "Thanks, Sergeant. I'm sure it's fine. These Pratt & Whitneys are bulletproof." Emma watched him climb into the cockpit, her stomach tightening with familiar anxiety. After 8 years of maintenance work, she'd developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when something was wrong with an aircraft. Today, something felt very wrong. The 6 F-16s taxied to the runway in 3 two-ship formations, their single engines creating a thunderous roar that echoed off the desert mountains. Emma stood at the edge of the flight line, watching as they lifted off into the crystal-clear Nevada sky. The exercise was scheduled to last 4 hours over the massive training range north of Las Vegas, but at 10:47 hours, Emma's worst fears materialized. The radio crackled with an emergency transmission. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Viper 22, experiencing catastrophic engine failure and fire. I'm going down." Emma's blood ran cold. Viper 22 was Lieutenant Anderson's aircraft, the F-16 she'd been worried about. Through the base's monitoring systems, she could see his aircraft's position, 60 miles north of Nellis, over rugged Nevada mountains with no suitable landing areas. "Viper 22, what's your status?" Colonel Thompson's voice cut through the radio chatter. "Engine is completely gone. Massive fire warning. All hydraulics are failing. I'm trying to maintain control, but I'm losing altitude fast. I don't think I can make it back to base." Emma closed her eyes, her mind automatically running through the F-16's emergency systems. She knew that aircraft intimately, knew its capabilities and limitations, and she knew something else, something that could save Lieutenant Anderson's life, but would destroy the carefully constructed identity she'd built over 8 years in the desert. The command post at Nellis erupted in controlled chaos as Lieutenant Anderson's emergency unfolded. Emma stood at the back of the room, watching the large screen displays showing his F-16's rapidly deteriorating situation. The aircraft was losing altitude over the Nevada mountains, with the nearest suitable runway 45 miles away. "Viper 22, can you maintain altitude for recovery to Nellis?" the senior controller asked. Lieutenant Anderson's voice crackled through the speakers, distorted by static and stress. "Negative. Control. Fire is spreading throughout the engine bay. All hydraulics are gone. I'm in manual reversion and barely maintaining control." Emma stepped forward, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Sir, request permission to speak with the pilot." The controller looked confused. "Sergeant, this is a flight emergency. We need to keep communications clear for qualified personnel." "I am qualified personnel," Emma said quietly, but her voice carried an authority that made everyone in the room turn to look at her. Without waiting for permission, Emma reached for a headset. "Viper 22, this is Sergeant Rodriguez on the ground. I need you to listen very carefully. Your engine fire is probably causing a cascade failure in your hydraulic systems. You need to configure for manual reversion immediately." "I'm already in manual reversion, Sergeant, but the controls are getting heavier every second." Emma closed her eyes, visualizing the F-16's cockpit and emergency procedures. "Lieutenant, there's an emergency hydraulic hand pump located behind your right elbow. You need to start pumping it manually to maintain what little hydraulic pressure you have left." "How do you know about the hand pump?" "That's not in the basic emergency procedures." The room had gone dead silent. Colonel Thompson stepped beside Emma, her eyes narrowed with suspicion and curiosity. "Sergeant Rodriguez, how do you know advanced F-16 emergency procedures?" Emma looked around the room, seeing the confused faces of people who had worked beside her for 8 years without truly knowing her. Lieutenant Anderson was still in mortal danger, still losing altitude over unforgiving terrain. "Because," Emma said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I've flown that exact emergency profile before, multiple times." Colonel Thompson's eyes widened. "You're a pilot?" "Was a pilot, ma'am. Captain Emma Mitchell, call sign Ace, 15 years active duty. I know that aircraft because I flew F-16s in combat for over a decade." The revelation hit the command post like a shockwave. Master Sergeant Williams stared at Emma as if seeing her for the first time. "You're Captain Mitchell, the weapons school instructor?" "Lieutenant Anderson," Emma continued into the headset, ignoring the stunned looks around her. "You need to configure for a dead-stick landing. There's an emergency airstrip at Indian Springs, about 20 miles southwest of your position. It's short, but it's your best option." "I can't see any airstrip on my charts." "That's because it's not on standard navigation charts. It's a classified training strip. Steer 240 degrees. Look for a single runway in the desert with approach lights." Colonel Thompson leaned toward Emma. "Captain, that strip is classified. How do you know about it?" Emma met her commanding officer's eyes. "Because I used to train there, ma'am, before I became a mechanic." Lieutenant Anderson's F-16 was now at 8,000 feet and descending rapidly toward the emergency strip, guided by Emma's precise instructions. The entire command post had fallen silent, everyone hanging on the radio conversation between the endangered pilot and the mechanic, who had suddenly revealed herself to be a former combat pilot. "Viper 2-2, you're approaching the Indian Springs emergency strip," Emma said, her voice now carrying the calm authority of an experienced fighter pilot. "The runway is 8,000 feet long but narrow. You'll need to be precise on your approach pattern." "Copy that. I have the strip in sight, but the stick is getting really heavy. I think I'm losing the last of my hydraulic pressure." Emma's mind raced through the F-16's flight control systems. "Lieutenant, when you lose all hydraulics, you'll be flying a 16,000-pound glider. The aircraft will want to pitch nose heavy. You'll need constant back pressure on the stick and use trim to help maintain attitude." Colonel Thompson stepped closer to Emma. "Captain Mitchell, I need to understand what's happening here. What's your actual background?" 15 years active duty, ma'am. F-16 pilot, weapons school instructor, 2 combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan." "I've got over 3,000 hours in the Viper," Emma replied without taking her eyes off the display screen. "And you've been working as a staff sergeant for 8 years? That's impossible." "It's a long story, ma'am. Right now I need to focus on getting Lieutenant Anderson on the ground safely." Lieutenant Anderson's voice came through the radio. "Control, I'm on final approach." The aircraft is responding, but barely. It's like wrestling with a truck. "You're going to have a high sink rate because of the dead engine," Emma replied. "Don't try to flare too early. Let the aircraft settle, and remember, without hydraulics, your wheel brakes are manual only. Plan for a long rollout." "Roger, I can see the runway numbers now." Emma found herself holding her breath, memories flooding back of her own emergency landings during her combat tours. The stress, the focus, the absolute concentration required to bring a crippled aircraft home safely. "Touchdown!" Lieutenant Anderson announced, and the room erupted in cheers. The F-16 rolled down the narrow desert runway, sparks flying from the landing gear as it finally came to rest 6,000 feet down the strip. "Viper 2-2 is safe on deck," Lieutenant Anderson reported. "Captain Mitchell, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life." Emma sagged against the console, 8 years of carefully maintained composure finally cracking. Around her, the command post was buzzing with activity and celebration, but she felt strangely detached from it all. "Captain Mitchell," Colonel Thompson said quietly, "I think we need to have a very serious conversation." The room was now looking at her with a mixture of awe, confusion, and respect. Master Sergeant Williams shook his head in amazement. "Ace Mitchell, I heard stories about you at weapons school. You were legendary." Emma looked around at the faces of people who had known her as a quiet mechanic for 8 years. "I'm just glad Lieutenant Anderson is safe." "Captain," Colonel Thompson said, "you need to explain how a decorated combat pilot ended up working as an enlisted mechanic under an assumed name." Emma nodded, knowing that her 8 years of hiding in the Nevada desert were finally over. "Yes, ma'am. I owe everyone an explanation." 2 hours later, Emma sat in Colonel Thompson's office, her real personnel file open on the desk. "Captain Emma Ace Mitchell," Colonel Thompson read aloud. 15 years active duty, F-16 pilot, weapons school instructor, distinguished flying cross, 127 combat missions. She looked up. Why are you working as a maintenance technician under a false identity? Emma stared at her hands. Because I couldn't fly anymore, ma'am. After Afghanistan, I developed severe PTSD, panic attacks, anxiety disorders. I couldn't get back in a cockpit without breaking down. But you're working around F-16s every day. Groundwork is different, ma'am. Maintenance is about fixing things. Flying is about being responsible for lives, for decisions that can kill people. So you enlisted under your maiden name? Emma nodded. I went back to Rodriguez and started over as an airman. I needed to serve, but couldn't handle the pressure of being a pilot anymore. Captain, what you did was fraudulent enlistment. I know, ma'am. I was desperate. I loved the Air Force, but couldn't function as a pilot. Colonel Thompson studied her. But today you functioned perfectly. You saved Lieutenant Anderson's life. Today was different. When I'm helping someone else, the fear goes away. It's only when I'm responsible for my own mission that I fall apart. Your combination of pilot knowledge and maintenance experience is invaluable. I'm recommending you be restored to your proper rank and assigned as a senior instructor. Emergency procedures, aircraft systems, pilot maintenance integration. What about my fraudulent enlistment? Colonel Thompson smiled. What fraudulent enlistment? You've been conducting an 8-year study of maintenance operations. Your report will revolutionize pilot training. For the first time in 8 years, Emma smiled genuinely. Yes, ma'am, I'd like that very much. 1 year later, Captain Emma Mitchell stood in front of pilot candidates at the Air Force Academy. Gone was the grease-stained flight suit, replaced by a crisp uniform with captain's bars gleaming on her collar. Who can tell me the most important person in aviation safety? She asked. A cadet raised his hand. The pilot, ma'am. Wrong. The most important person is your crew chief, the maintainer who knows your aircraft's health better than you know your own body. She moved to a cutaway F-16 engine. I spent 8 years as a maintainer after my flying career ended. I learned that aircraft don't lie. If you know how to listen, they'll tell you exactly what's wrong. After class, Emma walked to the maintenance hangar where she taught pilot candidates basic aircraft maintenance. The program was revolutionary. Future pilots learning their aircraft from the inside out. Hey, Captain Ace, called out a cadet working on an engine. This bird's got a weird vibration. Emma pulled on coveralls and placed a stethoscope against the engine, listening for irregularities the computers couldn't detect. Number 3 bearing showing wear. Not dangerous yet, but monitor it closely. How do you do that, ma'am? Experience, and the humility to know that sometimes the aircraft knows more than the computer. Lieutenant Anderson, now a seasoned pilot, knocked on her office door. Ma'am, I heard you're developing a new curriculum integrating pilot and maintenance training. Emma nodded. Create pilots who think like maintainers and maintainers who think like pilots. When we understand each other's perspectives, we all become more effective. I'd like to help with the program, ma'am. Emma smiled. Report to the maintenance hangar tomorrow at 0700. Bring clothes you don't mind getting dirty. 2 years later, Emma stood at Nellis watching new F-16 pilots prepare for red flag. She wore her captain's uniform with quiet pride. Pre-flight complete, Captain Mitchell, called out Lieutenant Williams. Emma inspected the F-16 with the same care she'd shown as a maintainer. She looks perfect. Bring her home safe. Emma reflected on her journey from combat pilot to hidden mechanic to respected instructor. She learned that service comes in many forms. Her pilot maintenance integration program was now standard at every Air Force base. As the F-16 lifted off, Emma smiled. She might never fly combat again, but she had found something equally important, ensuring the next generation would fly safely. At Rising Life Stories, we believe heroes are forged in struggle. Emma showed us that sometimes the most important flight brings you back to Earth, ready to serve in new ways. If this inspired you, please subscribe. There are heroes working quietly around us.